There we are, and welcome everyone. We're going to just wait a few minutes while folks file into this Zoom call. Hopefully you are here for the PLU Presidential Town Forum. If not, you can leave at any point. We won't know if you've left, thanks to the power of Zoom. So we're just going to wait here for a few minutes. Folks are filing in nicely in a very orderly PLU fashion. Folks are finding their seats. In typical PLU fashion, there's not a lot of shoving. People are being civil, and we thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to wait. We're going to wait a few more moments while folks continue to come in here. As we prepare to begin this evening, I'd like to welcome you all and wish you a happy homecoming. My name is Dan Lee, Vice President for University Relations here at PLU, and I am joined by two fabulous panelists today. This person is on my left, perhaps they're on your right, I'm not certain. First, I'm joined by Provost and Senior Vice President Joanna Gregson. And I'm also joined by President Alan Belton. We are delighted that you would join us this evening. We're hoping that this conversation will be that conversation. And regrettably, because of the limitations of Zoom and limitations of distance, those of you calling in are muted. We can't see you, but we can see your questions, and we can receive those questions. If you'll look at the bar in your Zoom window, it should be in the lower right. There'll be a Q&A function. And so we encourage you to use that, open that up and use that. Both Alan and Joanna have prepared some brief remarks to kick us off, seeking to address some of the questions we received ahead of time. And then we'll save the balance of our time for questions and answers from you. And then just a few maybe notes about logistics. This forum is intended to be an open forum and an open discussion. And as we kick off homecoming, we are joined by an amazing group of people. On the call, we have former and current members of our Board of Regents. We have loyal and generous donors to the university, many alumni. We're also joined by parents and current staff and even some faculty, all of whom wear multiple hats because that's the kind of place PLU is. So our comments tonight and the conversation will be mostly directed to alumni, donors, and parents. If there are particular questions that you really want to dig into, especially for the parents joining us tonight, we do have a Lute Family Forum, and that's being hosted on Saturday morning. We'll be joined at that forum. Joanna and Alan and I will all be there, as well as Joanna Royce-Davis, the Vice President for Student Life. And that will be an opportunity to get into some more specifics about the ways in which we are caring for your students, the ways in which we are walking with them in this really unprecedented year. So for tonight, we're going to talk a lot about current state of PLU, the direction that we're headed, some of the exciting initiatives happening, and we hope to address the questions that you have about this place that you all love. So with that caveat and that kind of those ground rules, if you will, we're hoping for a civil conversation. I'm going to try to keep Alan and Joanna from interrupting each other as the night goes on. And I'll make sure that your questions get answered as best we can. So welcome to homecoming. And Alan, I want to turn it over to you to kick things off.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we'll try not to talk over each other. We'll be good examples. We could use a little more of that. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us from your living room or your kitchen or wherever you happen to be, from across the region and across the country. I'm not sure if we have anybody joining us internationally tonight, but I know we have Lutz from joining us for homecoming activities from at least 25 states this week. So welcome. I want to start by expressing on behalf of the entire campus our gratitude to each and every one of you. Thanks to everyone who's provided financial support to PLU students and our programs. Thanks to parents for supporting your students and trusting us to take care of them. Navigating college, as Melinda and I know, is hard enough without the added complexities of a global pandemic. Thanks to alumni for continuing to tell the PLU story, making meaningful connections with students and living PLU's mission in your communities every single day. And thanks to our incredible faculty and staff whose unwavering commitment to our students and our mission continues to move us forward. I want to start just by sharing some observations and summary of what the last few months have been like at PLU, and talk about some of the things that we're doing to move forward. and then you'll hear from Joanna Gregson. So COVID. Last spring, in the early stages of the pandemic, our campus came together and converted more than 700 classrooms to fully remote in less than a week. In fact, I believe Joanna will nod here. I think it was less than 72 hours. Yeah. We sent most of our faculty and staff home to work remotely, all while continuing to serve students for whom PLU was their home or their only safe place that they know. So by the end of the semester, we still had, last spring, approximately 300 students still living on campus who we were caring for. In June, we shifted our COVID response team to a COVID recovery team and started planning for our eventual return to campus. Things were looking good. And then we saw a rapid growth in infection rates locally and regionally. And in early to mid-summer, we had to determine how we would be able to return students to campus for in-person learning this fall. I'm really happy to say, and in a very PLU way, we moved forward in partnership with our county and state public health officials, our local healthcare systems, our own campus experts, and with input from campus constituencies, including students. We created a comprehensive plan. And we planned for a staged return to campus with what we have affectionately come to know as QTQ. That's quarantine, test, and quarantine. And I'm sure parents on this call are very familiar with the rigors of QTQ. So we allowed early arrivals to start coming in August from out of state, international students, athletes, and others who needed to be here early. We waived the residency requirement and offered single rooms only to limit the number of students who would actually be on campus. We put into place a multi-pronged testing plan, which ended up being really what saved our bacon this fall. So we added this plan that included mass capacity. So we partnered with Tacoma Pierce County Health District to provide on-site and community testing. So not just for our students, staff, and faculty, but for the local community. We partnered with Quest Labs to have our own testing at our health center. The health center purchased its own equipment and supplies to do tests as well. And just so that we had plenty of backup, we actually partnered with Multi-Care Health System here in the South Sound region, and they provided us backup testing as well. So the plan included us coming back to campus, but then starting fully remote for at least that first week. We introduced a limited amount of blended learning in the second week, and that was primarily with students in labs and clinicals, community building classes, and the first year experience. And we created a status dial, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to our website and click on the coronavirus page and check it out. We're basing it on 10 measures, regional and campus-specific measures that will allow us to determine how ready we are to safely return to campus. And if you've likely read about any universities across the country returning to campus, only to experience some pretty significant outbreaks and strange, sometimes student behavior and faculty and staff behavior, where they've had outbreaks in the hundreds. We have had a very small number of positive cases on our campus. In fact, since March, we have had 6 instances of positive cases and only 3 current active cases on the PLU campus. No one case has been linked to another, nor has any case resulted in additional positive cases in any way. So our QTQ has worked very well, and we were able to immediately quarantine or isolate any student who was positive, contact trace any student who had been in contact, quarantine and test them as well, and then release the students after a negative test and quarantine period. So we've been able to minimize the impact in many ways, particularly enrollment. And I know that you all have a lot of questions about where PLU stands with enrollment. Nationwide, enrollment has been a huge issue for universities, including our own peers here in the state of Washington. Some of our peers in the state in conversation have shared that they have missed their enrollment targets by anywhere from 10 to 15, and then sometimes more than 15%. At PLU, we actually, believe it or not, met our new and transfer student goals for the fall. In fact, when you combine those two, we exceeded it by 3 students. So the parents who are on the call, thank you for sending your 3 students to PLU and helping us meet that goal. We also met our graduate student enrollment goal, and we exceeded our retention goal. Those, if you can take a minute, are pretty miraculous results compared to our peers, and would have been even stronger than that if it weren't for COVID. We know, for example, in surveying students who did withdraw, that more than 40 students withdrew directly due to COVID and the implications and hardships that placed on their families. So overall, we are down in total enrollment year over year, But that was not unanticipated. In fact, we had built that into our assumptions because we knew we were graduating this past spring one of the largest classes we've had in recent years, and replaced them with smaller classes for this year. So in addition to the hard work of our faculty and our staff to care for returning and new students, we held our own. And we did that in part by innovating on behalf of our students and introduced something called the Plus Year. And I assume you've heard of the Plus Year. If you haven't, Google it. It made quite a bit of news. So we, in meetings, Joanna and I were both part of the recovery team. And every conversation we had, we realized that whatever we did this fall, the student experience would not be what students expected. So we decided to offer 1 year tuition free to students who are fully enrolled this year, continuously enrolled, and they get that free year after they meet their expected graduation or degree completion date. So this allowed students to minimize their load this year to just remain full-time. They could add, if they decide to come back, a major or a minor. They could complete an extra year of athletics eligibility. They could participate in performing arts like choir, ensemble, theater, and dance, or just gain more skills before entering a really tough job market. We also offered continuing ed credits for our grad students as part of this package, and we received an incredible response from students, from families, and from the general public. So you might be asking yourself, kind of, what is the major financial impact then to PLU this year? It's not enrollment or net tuition as a result. It's instead the foregone revenue in the form of housing, dining, and auxiliary services. So as I noted earlier, in order to manage the inevitable positive cases we would have on campus, we made the decision to suspend the residency requirement and limit our housing density to single rooms only this fall. In order to accomplish that, we reached out to students who applied and asked students, nearly 400 students who had requested housing, to consider living at home to help ensure the safety of the entire community, and our students responded in kind. So all in all, a really tough and uncharted year for PLU, not unlike every institution of higher ed across the country, but our university is holding up remarkably well. In fact, we haven't lost sight of important traditions and the vital strategic work still happening at PLU. We're holding virtual chapel, and any of you can attend. Go to the website and check that out through campus ministry. We have virtual town halls like this. We've hosted a number of them, and we've had audiences exceeding 600 in some of those. We have postponed athletic competition, but we plan to host all sports in the spring, so wish us luck with that. We've released musical performances online and plan for this amazing virtual homecoming week, and thanks to Dan and his team for doing that. Thanks to our generous PLU family, including some of you who joined us tonight. We completed the new PLU School of Nursing, Clinical Learning and Simulation Center. We had a virtual tour of that facility, which Dan hosted with our Dean of the School of Nursing, Barbara Haberman, just a few days ago, and I have to tell you, it is spectacular. We opened what is arguably not only one of the best nursing facilities in the state of Washington, but in the country. We also put out a call to help our students overcome their own financial challenges resulting from COVID, and the PLU community responded with more than $300,000 in emergency aid for students. Thank you for that. We finalized and improved our university strategic plan. We completed a diversity and inclusion strategic plan, one that lives out our mission and calling as an institution of Lutheran higher education, and our relationship with the ELCA by establishing attainable goals for racial equity on our campus. We continued the efforts of the Presidential Commission for Innovation and Change, which I created just over a year ago, with a number of recommendations moving forward at a steady clip. And I want you to stay tuned for some of those because there's some exciting things coming to PLU. We reached an agreement to offer an accelerated Bachelor of Science in Nursing program, which will be submitted to the state in the coming weeks, and we hope to welcome our first cohort next fall. We temporarily delayed, but have recently re-engaged in an effort to rethink our academic structure to better align with current and future student needs while building on better aligning our own strengths on our campus, and so much more. And obviously, we can't do any of this without you, with the support of everyone I mentioned earlier, our generous donors, our families, our alumni, our faculty, and our staff. You make PLU what it is, and there is no other place I'd rather be as a result. So I look forward to answering your questions in a little bit, but now I want to turn it over to somebody much more eloquent than I, our great provost, Joanna Gregson.
Thanks, Alan. It is a pleasure to be here. And I was just thinking about what a privilege it is to represent the academic division at this moment in time. For those who don't know, I came into the role of provost after previously serving as faculty member at PLU in the Department of Sociology for 19 years. So together I've been at PLU for 23 years. And I honestly don't know if I felt more pride in my faculty colleagues or our amazing students than I do at this extraordinary moment in our institution's history. I really don't. The struggle is real. The struggle is real. But our faculty and our students are showing resilience. They're showing a commitment to learning. And the thing that makes me most proud, they are showing their extreme capacity to care for one another, for their families, for their communities. And I was just thinking that if that's what we accomplish from educating students at this unique chapter, is awakening their full capacity to care, then I will say we have done our jobs. And I think we're doing it pretty well. So I thought I would share just a few comments about our current learning environment, how faculty are adapting to teaching in this moment. And again, I'm thinking about this with an audience that is primarily alumni. I know there are some current parents out there. If I don't address particular questions you have now, there will be opportunities later, either later today, in email follow-up, or in the parent sessions coming up this weekend. So for context, for those who don't know, we are offering courses both online and blended this fall. Blended is a term that we use at PLU that you may have heard of as hybrid in other places. And those are classes that have elements of online and in-person learning, sometimes in a back and forth way, sometimes several weeks of one method before switching to the other. It all depends on the class. And as Alan mentioned, in making our decisions about which classes to offer in which modality, we prioritized blended learning for those courses with learning objectives that are more challenging to achieve remotely, like labs, as Alan said, or performance-based classes, as well as community building classes for first-year students. Faculty have prepared for online and blended teaching through our Pluto program. And for those who don't know, Pluto is our very clever abbreviation for PLU Teaching Online. I'll give you a moment to process that. Pluto has existed at PLU since 2014 when, thanks to a gift from a generous donor, we were the first school in the South Puget Sound to launch any kind of online educational programming. And while technological infrastructure is an important part of teaching online, our primary focus at PLU is on faculty preparedness, bringing the PLU standards of teaching excellence to wherever students are. So just as the in-person educational experience at PLU is distinct, so too is the online experience. And long before the pandemic, many faculty, myself included, participated in intensive month-long Pluto workshops to learn best practices for teaching online. This summer, we offered a Pluto Essentials curriculum for faculty with topics like how to create an online lesson, an online project, and using different communication, video, and audio tools. And I am so pleased to share that over the course of summer, 158 PLU faculty members voluntarily completed the program during a period when they are off contract and by all rights could have been recovering from an exhausting spring and far, far away from anything related to work. So a few examples of how people at PLU, how faculty have applied this Pluto philosophy, these Pluto lessons to their curricula. One example you can probably identify is that many faculty are holding classes with Zoom. So for some, it is, the camera's pointed and they're at the whiteboard and they're teaching that way. But others are assigning students to breakout rooms to discuss readings and ideas in small groups. They're planning their virtual backgrounds or changing their virtual backgrounds to correspond with the different lessons they're teaching or the readings they've assigned, or they've asked students to do the same thing, to show up to class with a virtual background that somehow speaks to them about whatever the course topic was. Faculty have reimagined field trips to include excursions in people's local neighborhoods. They're holding office hours well into the evening. Finding the virtual format allows them to more easily align their availability with times when students are studying and thinking about homework. And many are replacing tests and quizzes with group projects. I heard from a faculty member who's teaching a Greek Civ class, and he told me he replaced his usual midterm with a Wikipedia project. So he identified several ancient Greek terms that don't have Wikipedia entries, and he put the class into groups of 4 or 5, assigning them with 1 term each to create an entry for. He told me one of the students asked in class, if the assignment was supposed to be excruciatingly hard. And our faculty member replied, yes, because this is real research, not merely an assignment for practicing skills. And when you're done, you will have produced a real thing that lives in the real world and helps real people. The faculty member told me, we are increasing the world's access to knowledge while practicing useful skills. And he said he'd never have thought of the project if he hadn't rethought his pedagogy for remote learning. So I also, when I was asking faculty sort of, how's it going? And give me some examples of some, what's happening in your classes, many of our faculty talked about students, which doesn't surprise me at all. Teaching at PLU is about students. The safety monitors out there will appreciate that the first comment I heard from faculty about students was, quote, the students have been excellent at social distancing, wearing masks, and keeping everything clean. So that made me feel good. I heard from a faculty member that students are staying up to date on the readings, they're engaged. He said, quote, they're hungry to interact and hungry for the normalcy of an education. So every moment I have with them is a joy. And he meant it was a joy for him, which I think is really, really special. Another faculty member shared with me how impressed she was with her students and their capacity to forge connections with each other, either in a classroom wearing masks and 6 feet apart, or on the computer. She said in the blended class where she had online elements, students call each other by name in their Zoom discussion, which is easier because you can see people's names in the corner. That doesn't happen in real life. She said they thoughtfully respond to each other's online forum posts. And she didn't know how the PLU classroom environment would transfer online, but she is, quote, overjoyed to see the way that students are both connecting with and respecting each other. As counterintuitive as it may sound, online learning the Pluto way can assist with connections. Students are bringing cats, dogs, family members, even a rooster to their online classes, and our faculty are loving it. I also asked faculty if they could share with me some of their successes, some of their triumphs, and I think I'll share words from 2 faculty directly. So the first person said, I've grown as a teacher in ways I didn't know were possible, and I know this will help me as a teacher post-pandemic. I now know that I will be able to say yes when I'm asked if a student can successfully complete my class, even if they have to take a 2-week break for mental health or physical health reasons. I now have the skills to support this kind of learning. And another faculty said, quote, after 20 years of in-person teaching, online teaching has offered me a professional challenge that I have found really engaging. It's an intellectual puzzle to figure out that has helped me refine my pedagogy in ways that will improve my teaching even after we're back in the classroom. For example, using universal design, offering more creative assignments like projects instead of tests, and working with students in small groups. I've really rethought everything I do to maximize student learning. And before we open to questions, I want to offer my gratitude for the support you have shown us. And I think I'm gonna start by sharing something personal. Dan and Alan don't know I'm gonna do this, but I received a letter today with a postmark, I don't know if you can see it, from Australia. And I'm gonna share this with you. The card in PLU black and gold says, thinking of you. And I'll read you what it says. Joanna, I just wanted to send you a little note to let you know that I'm thinking of you from the other side of the world. I'd imagine you are supporting heaps of students and colleagues through this COVID-19 nightmare. Just remember what you helped us students through in 2001 when you were just a wee little mini prof. You've got this. Take care of yourself. Love, Jen. And the envelope was filled with little paper hearts. This is an alumni from 2001, Australia, who sent me this note for no reason other than she's a member of the PLU community, and that's what members of the PLU community do. So to all of you who've shared a kind word with an old and getting older professor, who've reached out to a former PLU classmate to see how they're doing, or who've donated to our emergency fund to support students whose families may be struggling right now, I want to thank you. You don't get these kinds of relationships just anywhere, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. So thank you, and now I look forward to answering your questions.
I don't always love surprises, but that was a good one. Thank you, Joanna. And I was really hoping that I wouldn't cry on this webinar. So I'm going to try to just hold it together, and we're going to just roll through this. And, you know, it was occurring to me that, that we've done things like this. We have a history, of course, at homecoming of having a president's dinner. And typically you would hear some speeches like this, some updates from campus, and you'd often hear a student speaker or other updates. But of course, everyone in the room is drinking whatever wine we've provided them, and they're wearing uncomfortable clothes, very nice clothes usually, but uncomfortable ones. And the power of this moment when we get to reach into people's homes, we have people, we do have people calling in from outside the United States, Alan, as you suggested, and you could be at home drinking whatever you'd like, wearing whatever you'd like. And so I hope that you're both comfortable and engaged. The Q&A function is down in the lower right-hand corner. And so I hope that you'll utilize that to put in questions. And we received several during our updates and also beforehand. So I'm gonna go into those now. And just as a matter of kind of practice, I won't be reading every question explicitly as it's suggested, and I may be combining questions because often you can tell how the audience is feeling by how the questions are kind of grouping themselves. So let's jump in. I'm just going to start off by jumping into finances because, you know, that Alan, you touched on that briefly, and I think you addressed several of the financial impacts of COVID and what's happening. And there's been news in our region, for those that aren't in our region. Concordia University in Portland closed last year, I want to say. That feels like a lifetime ago almost. And that, for those outside of Concordia, that closure looked rather abrupt. I think those that were perhaps more on the inside had some insight into what was happening at Concordia systemically. But as we think about finances and the stability of this university we love, Alan, how do you see the future of PLU and both its current effect, but also where PLU is headed? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not only a great question, it's probably the question I receive most of all. I think for those who know a little bit about how I came to PLU, I actually came here as the finance person. So I was hired as PLU, basically PLU's chief financial officer a few years ago. And part of that was, I think, a university that recognized that enrollment in higher ed was on the decline. In fact, one of the people on this screen, Joanna Gregson, has really done a marvelous job of leading the university through understanding, just based on birth rates and college going rates, that the university was facing this issue for some time. So it's not new to us. So, you know, the good news is PLU was prepared for declining enrollments. What we were not prepared for, is probably nobody was prepared for, was an international global pandemic. You know, let's be honest, this has had an impact on our finances, like I mentioned. And when you don't allow 400 students who want to live on campus to choose not to live on campus, that is very costly, because that's a lot of revenue that the university will lose. And we've had to tighten our belts for sure. We'd already been doing that work in preparation for an expected national enrollment decline by 2025. And we've continued to work on being more efficient and really focusing on what programs are the most strategic for us and how can we grow them, so that it's not always about cutting. I'm a firm believer that you will never cut your way to success. You have to be able to adapt and grow and offer kind of education that PLU offers that will attract students, but also the programs that are meaningful to students. And I'm sure Joanna has many examples of programs that we introduced in the last 5 years. So the bottom line is, it will be a really tough year financially. We have balanced our budget, and that has been painful. But we've done it in a way where we have approached any changes to our budget from our mission. And our mission is educating students. So everything we've done has been sequenced on trying to protect students and support for students and their education and making it worth what they're paying to come to PLU. And then it's focused on what we can do to protect our own staff and faculty. And that hasn't been easy. Our staff and faculty are sacrificing this year. And this is not the first year, based on everything I just told you. So, you know, I think if you want to hold on to something really positive, I've spent 30 years now in a career that included 25 years of corporate finance. And I have never in that time seen an institution that could come together more purposefully and quickly and with heart to make decisions about finances. So I'm confident we're continuing to work through really tough times, but I'm absolutely confident the PLU will not be one of those institutions that has to fold. We will be an institution that thrives.
Thank you, Alan. This is not a question, I want to call it a comment that came in. They're using the question and answer function to put in comments, including one from a student from 2001 sociology classes. No question for you, Joanna, just expressing sheer happiness at being an alumna and seeing you. So this is one of the fun parts about having colleagues who have such rich history and relationships with a place like PLU. Another question that came in was about, Alan, you alluded to, it was about curriculum and coursework and other things. Joanna, do you think that the changes in and around the pandemic will have permanent consequences for how PLU approaches higher education? I'd actually love for each of you to think about that one. Do you think this will have permanent consequences for how we approach the work of our education? I'm happy to have either of you answer that one if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll get started. Mm-hmm. I think if you had asked me this question, or this question had been posed to me in March or April, I would have said no. Partly because none of us had the brain space to think beyond the day. But I really think there's something happening now where many of us, both, professionally, higher ed, but also in our social lives, are realizing there are things we can do differently. When forced to do differently, we can. And what I'm hearing from many of my faculty colleagues is there are things that they'll take from this, as I shared in some of my examples, that will bolster their on-the-ground teaching. I don't envision, and Alan, I'll be curious to hear what you say, PLU ever being something other than a residential campus. That's not going to change. But I think we've learned that we can expand our footprint in ways we hadn't envisioned before. We can bring PLU to more students than we had before. With some of these online modalities, we can have, as the example I gave, we can have virtual office hours with students in the evening, which doesn't mean we have to stay at work until 8 or 9 p.m. to do it. We can leave a little earlier, be with our families, have dinner, and then turn the computer on again to meet students where they are. So I do see some permanent impacts from this, and I see them being really, really positive. What do you think, Alan?
Well, first of all, I completely agree, and I particularly agree with the fact that PLU will continue to be a residential campus primarily, that we will be a liberal arts university that just genuinely does an exceptional job of intertwining the liberal arts with the professional schools. What I'm struck by, and I'm in some ways here, you're gonna hear some bragging about PLU, because 2 years ago, when I was still the acting president, one of the things we as a leadership team wanted to do was create a strategic plan for the university that we could hand to the next president. And we did that work, and we completed it before COVID. And then, be careful what you ask for. The Board of Regents asked me to continue to deliver on that strategic plan. But let me tell you some of the key elements of what's in that strategic plan. And you will hear why PLU will come out of this stronger as a result of COVID, but also you will understand why we are an institution that is prepared for the future because of COVID. So one of the key elements of our strategic plan was to become, by taking advantage of what we are already good at, the premier health science institution in the region. We have an excellent nursing program, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. Marriage and family therapy, and kinesiology, and social work, and psychology, and the list goes on and on. So let's take what we're really good at and go to market with that, and partner in the community and find out where we can solve needs that aren't currently being solved. So COVID hits, seems really appropriate that's been our focus. One of the other areas of focus is well-being, both mental and physical well-being, not only of our students, but of our faculty and staff and our community. So here we are focused on two key elements that we have had to innovate on during COVID. And then the other is, which Joanna just hit on, one of the other key elements was we were going to innovate in a way that we can deliver PLU to students who might not otherwise have access to PLU. And that might include non-residential students. So you heard me talk about an accelerated BSN program, which will be delivered in a blended manner. You've heard Joanna talk about the way our faculty are innovating with students' help, how we deliver our programs. And so all of these things were already in place for us. We were already focused on them. And I think we come out of COVID stronger, and maybe realizing that we were right in the direction we were headed.
Thank you. Let's talk about curricular innovation and other things that are happening there. Joanna, pre-COVID, we also were working on new programs. One of the questions that came in are, do we have any new majors at PLU, or what's on the docket? What's coming next in terms of curriculum revision and new programs?
Sure, I'd be happy to speak about that. Last year, in the before times, before everything happened, our faculty developed and approved a number of new programs that we launched this year. So just thinking in chronological order, we launched a new master's program, the Master of Science in Kinesiology, which enrolled its first cohort beginning this summer. So that's new. We approved 3 programs that, as I think about it now, kind of like what Alan was saying with the strategic plan, I cannot believe the timing of our creating these programs. And I say our, this is the faculty project. So we developed and approved new majors in gender, sexuality, and race studies, Latino studies, and criminal justice. And when you think about the salient issues, the things that we need to be talking about as a society, that we need to be discussing, that's it. And that's what our faculty developed last year and we're launching right now. There are a number of other programs in the pipeline. It feels premature to talk about them right now because they haven't been approved through our faculty process, but I can assure you that our faculty, even amidst everything, right? Even amidst everything, they're still submitting proposals to do things that are new and different and forward thinking. So there will be more to come.
So you mentioned salient issues, Joanna, and you know, how PLU continues to address what is happening in our society. The ideas of diversity and justice were called out in PLU's strategic plan in 2010, I believe, which was then PLU 2020. And Alan, you mentioned a moment ago the diversity and inclusion strategic plan. We've received a couple questions about how and if and how PLU welcomes all voices, and how PLU is continuing. Can you give some examples and tell us what is happening in terms of how PLU is being a model for some of these salient issues, especially as we deal with significant issues of racial inequity and injustice in our society? Alan, do you want to start there?
Yeah, I can start. Well, let me just start by making a statement here. If PLU were a place that didn't welcome all voices, if PLU weren't a place where everybody worked together to try to make sure that you didn't just have a sense of belonging, you had a reality of belonging, I would not have come to PLU. It simply wouldn't have. That I definitely hear, as the president, I hear concerns from folks of all opinions, right? So left and right, red and blue, gay and straight, you name it. I hear opinions and I hear concerns that maybe PLU is leaning too far one direction or the other. The reality that I have experienced, and it was from the moment I arrived on the campus, is that this is a place where you can be yourself. Now, that is not to say that every student will experience that, right? Because despite our best efforts, I think that there will be experiences by some who feel like maybe this isn't the place for them, or maybe they felt like they weren't able to be themselves. But the key is that we've got the people and the processes in place to help them. And you know, I think of example after example where we will have a student group want to bring a speaker, and the speaker is controversial. And I'm not going to get into the details, but I can just think of an example from about 1.5 years ago. A student group partnered with a national organization to come in and provide a topic to the campus. And it became real apparent that that organization was controversial. And so on other campuses, what you would see is people protesting, you would see arguments in the media and the press about it. What happened at PLU was the leadership, the student leadership from the group who was bringing this in, and the student leadership from a group that opposed it, got together and brought in a second speaker 2 weeks later to deal with the topic from a different perspective. And in the interim, they worked with a faculty member to have a conversation in between those two meetings about how you have a dialogue where everybody can be comfortable expressing themselves. I haven't worked at a place that's been that open to all ideas ever. And again, I would just reiterate, if that weren't the case, if PLU didn't demonstrate that daily, I would not have chosen to come here.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that the kind of community you described, Alan, is not one that happens by, it's not happenstance. It's not, oh, kumbaya, come to PLU and everything's lovely and rosy. It is intentional. And with that intentionality comes work. And the reason we have the community we do that can engage in these dialogues is because we do the work. And I think of it again, you know, my heart is in the academic division, and I think of the work we do in the classroom about educating students for lives of thoughtful inquiry. That our project as educators is helping students ask questions. We talk about asking big enough questions. It's helping students wrestle with things that are complicated and hard, because that's what these issues are. They're complicated, they're hard, there are different perspectives on them. So it's not to say, and I don't want anybody who hasn't been on campus for a while to think we have this oasis, this bubble where everybody belongs and it just happens. And you didn't suggest that, Alan, but I just want to make sure folks know it's intentional. It is very, very intentional that we work and see this as work that is not done. It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, and we are committed to continuing to engage in dialogue and understanding with each other.
And if you want to know why it's intentional or how it's intentional, you need only look at our middle name. Mm-hmm. We are a Lutheran institution, Lutheran higher education. Go to our website and search on the tenets of Lutheran higher education, and you will see why it is so purposefully an intentional aspect of PLU.
Well, see, Alan, be careful what you bring up, because I have another question here that came in. I'll just comment on a personal level how fun it is to see these questions coming in from people that I know IRL, which is what the young people say when they refer to in real life. So it's fun to see some of these names and some of the questions coming in. Can you talk a bit about PLU's Lutheran identity and its heritage, and how that informs our academic commitments, residential life values, etc.? And and I'm summarizing this. And this comes from two Lutes who really do believe that the world needs more Lutes, as you like to say. And so, Alan, can you address how is that manifesting itself in the current PLU and where we're going?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's definitely another one of those that I do hear a lot, and I hear it expressed in different ways, both expressions of concern and expressions of gratitude and hope. So it comes from all different directions. I would say, you look no further than the middle name again, right? But so let me just share kind of my own experience with PLU being Lutheran enough or not Lutheran enough, right? So one of the first questions I was ever asked by a potential student, and I was the CFO, I wasn't the president. I was surprised anybody wanted to meet with me, but I had a mom and dad bring their son who was considering PLU. I'm gonna say up front, he did not choose to come here. It wasn't the best fit for this particular student. But they asked me a question, I think in my first month on the job, and the question was framed as, "I'm afraid of the middle name. What does it mean to come to a Lutheran institution?" So we are in the none zone. Let's be honest about that. We're in the least churched area of the country, right? And interestingly enough, I had just been asked by Samuel Torvin to read the 7 tenets of Lutheran higher education that he worked along with his peers on so diligently. And one of those that stuck with me particularly was the intrinsic value of the whole creation. And I was able to respond to that family about what that meant to me, and how it meant that even a person like myself, who is a corporate finance, a corporate banker, which carries a whole different moniker with it, right? Here is a liberal arts institution that welcomed a corporate banker, not only welcomed me into the community, but asked me to be myself, express myself, and find out who I truly am as an individual, and how that might contribute to not only to the PLU community, but to society. So much so that they even welcomed me into being president. Now, at the time, I wasn't able to say the part about president, but I was able to communicate what that meant. And that really registered not only with that student, their family. Unfortunately, they went to my alma mater, a lesser school in Pullman. The other thing I would share, which I'm really, really proud of, is a recent change to the corporate bylaws for PLU. We've struggled a lot with the requirement that the president be Lutheran. And our board and our corporation, particularly our board of regents, spent some time listening to our community. And I was a part of that conversation because this was really important to me. I think it's not enough to simply hire a president that's Lutheran. And so we worked together, and the corporation recently approved some language that I'd share with you because I printed it out in case I get asked that question. We put in the qualifications of the president into the bylaws of the institution. And we were very specific. And I want to read to the first part of this particular bylaw. The PLU president demonstrates a deep understanding of and commitment to the mission, vision, and values of the university, Lutheran higher education as articulated in the document Core Elements of Lutheran Higher Education, and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, ELCA. It is essential that the president hold the relationship with the ELCA with reverence and care. PLU's relationship with the ELCA nurtures and supports the values expressed in Lutheran higher education. We have codified that as part of what it means to be the president of this institution. So hold me accountable.
Thank you, Alan. You've mentioned the liberal arts a couple times, and there were a few questions that have come in particular, thinking about how we see the liberal arts connected to the professional schools. And as we focus, on, let's say, as we focus on health sciences and being a premier health sciences institution, does that mean that the liberal arts is somehow diminished?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The only reason I can function as a Washington State University Cougar graduate at PLU is that I was in the honors program, which required a liberal arts education. So I had a separate college that allowed me to be a business major who understood what it meant to get a liberal arts education. That is sacrosanct to what PLU is all about. And just yesterday, I was in a meeting with a local healthcare system sitting in their offices with a mask on. I had the chief surgeon and the president of the particular hospital I was at sitting in the room with me. And we were having a conversation, and they were going basically berserk about how much they love PLU nurses, PLU accountants, any PLU business major that they get, all the pre-med students that come up through their program and do practicums at their facilities, because in their words, we know that we're going to get somebody who has a liberal arts education. They can think, they care, and they have the skills. If we don't continue to emphasize that, if that is not core to who we are as an institution, there is really no reason for anybody to ever hire a PLU graduate, right? That's what we're all about. That's what makes our graduates special. So that will not change.
Thank you. It's kind of fun to be the person who gets to ask the tough questions here. So this is
tough question to Joanna.
I've got a couple questions about the plus year. How can we afford it? And is there an impact on PLU's finances because of it?
Right. Yes, we can, and there may be. Is that enough?
You could elaborate, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So again, in that conversation, when we came up with this idea, one of the things that became apparent really quickly is if you think about how it works, it's not about giving a student a year that they would have used anyway. So imagine that you're a parent on this call and you have a senior, and that senior is scheduled to complete their degree in May of 2021, so in just a few months. They're facing a really awful job market, a lot of uncertainty, and they've had a year that's less than optimal. So that senior who would not have been here next year may decide to stay. So we are not foregoing revenue that we were counting on, right? That's the key. We're actually allowing that student to come back. We're not going to collect any more revenue from them, but we're not losing any revenue we would have had. What's really important to understand, though, and we know this, and we will be on top of this, is that if, let's say, every single student decided to take advantage of this, and over the next 4 years, the students who enrolled this year decide to come back for an extra year, we may have some really big classes, right? So we're going to have to hold up hiring of additional faculty in the courses that are in demand as a result of students staying. We're going to have to make sure we have the student support services to take care of them. Projecting forward, you heard me talk earlier about the fact that enrollment is declining nationally, and we anticipate that we'll be part of that. So if you think about a declining enrollment and allowing students to stay, chances are we're going to have a happy medium, but we fully acknowledge that we're going to have to provide those resources to support those students.
I've received a couple questions about donations and fundraising. And if we had the head of fundraising here on this call, I might ask this of that person.
You want us to ask you?
One of the questions was around how the current climate is affecting our fundraising, our engagement with donors. And a second question similar to that was about how we are shifting strategy or revising how are we diversifying our revenue seeking activities? How are we diversifying revenue and revising the budget? So I think I'm happy to answer part of that. I think the other question is really about philanthropic priorities too. And that's another question I've received. So fair warning, I'm going to ask you about philanthropic priorities next, Alan and Joanna. But to answer this question in terms of how it's affected donor behavior, we've seen some really interesting things happen. On one hand, we actually saw a significant increase in donors, especially this spring. The PLU community was motivated heavily to respond, as Alan mentioned at the beginning, to provide emergency student scholarships. And so we benchmark ourselves against our peers, and of course we talk to our peers and look at what they're experiencing. While many of our peers experienced a donor decline, we actually saw a significant increase. At the same time, we saw many people pause their giving or reconsider especially larger gifts. And so that's where and that happened especially as we were trying to close out fundraising for the School of Nursing and the Clinical Learning and Simulation Center. And so we've pivoted our strategy a bit to focus, especially this spring and into the summer, on family foundations and those foundations that are able to make more significant investments, even as the market is somewhat volatile. We've also been patient with people, and the relationships that we have with donors are focused on philanthropy. We're not so concerned about, as a mentor of mine would say, getting a quick nickel when that donor is interested in investing a slow dime and really wants to make a difference. And so our conversations have been around what's the difference that you want to make and what's the timing that makes the most sense. And so Alan's very aware of a relationship with a particular donor. She was ready to support the nursing building and then paused this spring when things were so volatile and she was feeling so uncertain. Since then has come back and said, okay, now I'm ready and I'm excited to do this. And that kind of excitement is what we're looking for, and what really, for Alan, for Joanna and me, I think it fills us with some joy and possibility. So what about philanthropic priorities? Alan, as the folks on this call and their friends consider what are the highest priorities for PLU right now, as this person has asked, what would you say? And Joanna, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. I will say we didn't answer the second part of their question, so if I could just take, this sounds like one of the debates for the president or vice president, but I'm going to go back just because the question about what are we doing to diversify our revenue, and that's something we've been working on for some time. You heard me mention very briefly something called the Presidential Commission for Innovation and Change, and that's actually one of the charges for that group, is to think about ways that PLU can use its strengths to diversify revenue. Some of that will come through partnership. You heard the accelerated BSN. There are other partnerships we're working on. Some of it will come through ways we take advantage of some of our strongest assets, which are unused real estate. So there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that we're doing, including our partnerships on Garfield Street. And all of these things are squarely focused on the Parkland community and our mission, and not forgetting that. So I just wanted to share that. In terms of priorities, really. There's the immediate and the long term. I'm very much a strategic planner, and I like to think about the big priorities that we have for the health sciences, for well-being, for our facilities. Some of the things that require a long campaign, a really focused campaign where we can really focus in on strategy, focus in on what's important to folks who are friends of the university and how they want to invest and how best to invest. So there are those, but I think in the short term, really, this is a challenging time, and there are things like access for students. I mean, I think the example of $300,000 raised almost overnight, really, in fundraising terms, by our alumni and by our friends of the university for our students. And I mean, we have story after story about how impactful that was for students to be able to eat, be able to pay their rent, right? Basics. So those remain a high priority for this year. I would say there are some other things. In tough times, one of the first things that gets cut is any kind of professional development for our faculty and staff. That's an area I think of more immediate need that I would love to see us be able to focus on. As we've had to cut, we're going to rely more on the generosity of others. And then, beyond that, I really think it's just about, as a philanthropist, as somebody who's thinking about where you want to give, it's where you will have that really genuine connection between where you can make the most difference and what's really in your heart, what's meaningful to you. So that's kind of a cop out, but I feel like as somebody who gives to PLU and to others, that's the sweet spot. So it's not so much about what's important to me, it's about what's important to you.
So Alan, nice job saying professional development. That was first on my list. Check. So thank you for doing that. And student scholarships and student access. Absolutely, absolutely. Priorities for all of us. I would also underscore your last comment about giving to what you love. And I think all of the alumni on this call, there you go. There's a reason you're on this call. There's something about PLU that is compelling you to come back and to engage. And gosh, if you had a favorite professor from a department you loved, make a gift to them. They could do something really cool with it. I'm sure of it. In a bigger way, I would also like to highlight the great things we can do with gifts to our Academic Program Investment Fund, or APIF. Without getting into too many of the weeds here, for me to have the resources to invest in a new program that faculty might bring to me, I can't tell you how many times a faculty member will say, oh, I would like to do this, but we can't because we don't have enough faculty. And I would love to be able to say, do it anyway, do it anyway. We'll get you the resources. So to have the discretion to invest in good ideas, because we know our people have really good ideas. I would love the capacity to do more with that. I also want to put in a plug for I don't know if it still counts as philanthropic, non-philanthropic, non-financial. I keep coming back to this letter I got today. If any of you out there have a former professor, a former classmate, somebody you haven't reached out to, that's important to us. This is about community. If you have ideas for things we can do, that's giving. I think a lot about our current students, many of our first year students who are coming to college for the first time, experiencing residential life, wearing masks all the time. That's not what they expected. And if you have ideas for what we might do to make that experience even more meaningful for them, let us know. And side note, if any of you out there are parents of current students, please know we'll address all of these matters in our future conversations that are more focused on their current cohort of students. But yeah, I see great opportunities for our community out there to assist us with their time, their talent, their treasure in many different ways.
And as the president and finance person, I'm okay if that envelope with the hearts also includes a check. I just had to put that out there.
I think I'll pick up on a couple of things that you shared and just a couple reminders for those on the call. One of them is that one of the best ways that we can support both current students through mentoring relationships and also as they transition into career is through our alumni and student connections office. And many of you are aware that we relaunched a thing called Loot Link in the last year. And this is a platform where you can engage with your fellow alumni who have professional interests that you have in common. It's also a place for career mentoring and for helping each other so that we can really manifest that Loot network. And that's one of the things that I think has been most impactful. We have folks signing up there who want to donate their time and engage with a current student and help them just think differently. That kind of engagement can happen in one meeting, one time. It can also be a long-term relationship in which you might mentor that student over the course of their time at PLU or into graduation. So I'd really encourage you to look into those resources as well. We are almost at time, and so I do have one final question that came in that I really want to ask both of you. It did not come from an eighth grader, but it's a really good question. So I'm saving that, and then I'll wrap up with a few logistics here at the end. I think you've talked about this tonight, but could you each talk about where you are finding hope as we look to the future and as you think about this wonderful place that we love called PLU? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first, Alan. I'll go first. this won't surprise any of you on the call who know me, and know, like I say, my roots are as a faculty member. It sounds trite, but it is true. Our students and the work our faculty are doing with our students, that gives me hope. I was in tears today talking to faculty about the experiences they're having with students today. I had a call with our president and vice president from our student government, the ASPLU. I asked them how they're doing, and they told me candidly and sincerely, and we had a connection about it. And yeah, it's the relationships right now that are giving me hope. And when I think about the relationships, I mean, I grew up at PLU basically, right? I grew up here. This is my community, and this place and these people give me hope. We can do it, and we can do it well.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is going to sound a little contrary to the question, but I actually find hope in the students, particularly the first year students who are struggling. I happened upon a class that was actually being held in person. It was 5 students in a big classroom, all masked up, just as they were exiting. And one of the students actually recognized somehow my bald head, I'm assuming, because I was wearing a mask, and just said, "Hey, aren't you the president?" Yeah, so I inquired. Student is a first year, stuck in their dorm room. I won't mention which residence hall, except for that one class, and really kind of struggling with the transition. And we had what felt like an hour conversation. I'm sure it was 5 minutes, but it was just connecting on that experience and the experience my son is having as a sophomore, stuck in his room with all of his classes remote. And despite that challenge, getting from that conversation how I might be able to help. And amazingly, at the end of the conversation, a thank you from that student. That gives me hope.
Thank you both. This has been so much fun. And I'll just end with a few things. One is, again, just a word of gratitude. I wish we could all be together. I know we all do here on this call, but this has been a wonderful way for us to connect with you from great distance as we manifest this LUT community. There's a host of other ways you can participate in homecoming over the weekend. We have over 30 teams registered for trivia, which starts in 30 minutes. It's my understanding that the Belton Brainiacs are actually competing from their home. Alan had to call in some ringers, including his spouse, who's a PLU alum, and their brilliant children. So watch out for them. Of course, PLU on Tap is on Saturday. Any of those resources, if you happen to live locally, are for sale at 208 Garfield. We'll be having a virtual wine and beer tasting with alumni producers. And I have some special guests joining me for that tasting. And then, as we mentioned a couple times tonight, for the parents on the call especially, there's a family forum Saturday morning, and we're going to address many of these questions. Joanna Royce Davis, Vice President for Student Life, will be with us, so I hope you'll join us there. I'm going to end, as I said, with a word of gratitude for all of you for making PLU what it is, and to quote our provost, helping to awaken their full capacity to care. I think that's something we can all hold on to. So, Lutz, good night and good luck.